and it'll take me just a few, an hour or two to edit the video, take out all the bad words and stuff, and then I'll put it up on my YouTube channel. It will be a private video that we will give you the link for, so that only people who paid for the class can see the video. And it will remain private for, I forget how long, I told you. And then it will become public, and the packet will be released. But I won't release the packet right away, because you paid to have a class that's special, so that's how it's going to stay. Wait, I'm not floating very well on this one. And if you're already done floating around your cactus, you can start floating on the outside edge all the way around. That one will go quick. You just don't want to float down here on the white border. We are going to add some more floating in some areas on the background around the cactus, but that will be later, and it won't be all the way around. Thank goodness. Right, so now I'm going to float that same color on the outside edges. I'm not going to go above this border line, this white border though. So just the outside edges. So you're going to need these three colors: matcha green, soft black, and golden straw. Sorry about the plane. So matcha green, soft black, and golden straw. We're going to work on these three cactuses, cactus grouping 1. And the first thing we're going to do is we are going to dry brush highlighting through the centers of these three cactus. I'm going to show you how I like to dry brush, and then you could try it, or you can do it the way you like, or the way you're comfortable with. But I like to use a Langnickel short round sable brush, and when I first buy them, they're very pointy. Let me see if I can find one. This one has a blue handle, but they're kind of pointy like this. And then after I use them a while, they start losing their point. They just get a different point. And actually, this is where I like them to be for dry brushing, but they will wear down all the way to like this. You see, it's flat. That's still a good dry brush for like cheeks and stuff. So I have a ton of them that look like this. But anyway, this is my favorite place for them to be. So what I want to do is I want to take my soft, short round brush, and I'm going to pick up some golden, not golden straw, that was dumb. I'm going to pick up some matcha green on my brush. Now the brush is dry, don't add water to it, that's why it's called a dry brush. But I'm going to pick up some matcha green on my brush, and then I'm going to scrub it around on my palette, and I'm going to go clockwise and counterclockwise, and what I'm doing is I'm working that paint into the bristles of the brush so I can dry brush with it. So after I've done that, what I like to do is wipe my brush off on the towel that I have behind there, or on your towel that you wipe your brush out. And then I will go to this part of my hand. You can even see a little bit of paint there from yesterday. I did take a shower. And I'm going to hit my hand with this and just kind of scrub it around. And when I initially hit my hand, it feels cool. But after I scrub it around a little bit, it loses its coolness. It doesn't get hot or warm or anything. It's just not cool anymore. So when it gets to that point, then I know I can go to my piece and I can start dry brushing. So I'm going to go down the center of each of these cactus with a dry brush of matcha green. And you should have to scrub to get that color off your brush. That's the idea. Now if I need to add paint, I go back through those steps again of loading the brush, scrubbing it on my palette, wiping it out on my towel, and scrubbing it on my hand a little bit so that I can come back in here and dry brush this other third cactus. So just all the way down the center, you're going to dry brush a highlight on those three cactus. So once you get that dry brushing done, you can wash out your dry brush. And another reason that I like these brushes is I can wash this brush out, and then I can go to my towel here and scrub it, and it gets dry, and I can use it again on the next color that I need to dry brush. We are going to float some shading on these cactus with the soft black, and that's going to go down both outside edges and at the bottom of the cactus where it's behind other cactuses. So that's a float of soft black. So I'll turn my piece a little bit, and I'm just going to float all the way along the bottom, the base of that cactus next to the other cactus. Some of these are cactus and some of these are succulents. I have a front yard full of these. In my backyard it's full of plumeria. So I have the desert in the front and Hawaii in the back. So now you're just going to go down the outside edges of all three of those. And what I like to do is kind of start at the top and just come down. So my float at the top is a little bit thinner than the floats that are on the sides. And then I'm going to go back and do the other side. The other side is easier for me to pull from the bottom up to the top. And you're also going to float around the arm of the prickly pear cactus, where it's on top of this cactus. We are going to add these little lines, these little squiggly lines. If you need to put a pattern on, you can, but really you could freehand these. They just all start at the very tip top, and you just kind of do like a little lifeline all the way down to the bottom. And it doesn't have to have the same amount as what are on the original, whatever you can get in there. But I like to use a #1 liner and some thinned matcha green to add those little lines. So thin your paint down like liner consistency. And let's just start giving it those little squiggly lines. And throw your brush down because it works better that way. So I'm just going to start at the very center top, and I'm just going to start pulling some little squiggly lines. And you want them to get thick and thin and vary in width. I even do right up at the edge here too. I might do part of one that isn't completely from the top to the bottom, because you don't want to have a big old empty space. We are going to line a highlight in like the upper 2/3 of each of those little squiggly lines. I hope you didn't make them too small, with golden straw. So you're just going to come down about 2/3 of the way and line a little highlight on each of those little squiggly lines. So you'll be really, really good at them when we're done. And so just liner consistency, and even if it doesn't stay on the line exactly, that's okay. We're not into perfection. So I'm just taking it down about 2/3 of the way and letting it kind of trail off. This will go much faster than the original did because you already know where you're going to go. if you've painted with me before, you know that I don't leave much alone. So if we do a line, it's most likely going to get highlighted. Just a warning. Right. We are going to, in the same way, we're going to line some shading in between a few of the ridges on the right side of the middle cactus and the right cactus, and then on the left side of the left cactus. So it goes in between those squiggly lines that you did. You're just going to thin down some soft black, and you're just going to line some shadow in between just to make those stand out a little bit more. So maybe 2 or 3 of them. Don't forget to take it all the way down to the bottom. So I'm doing the right side of the center cactus and the on the middle and right cactus, and then the left side of the cactus on the left. So you want to get out some bleach sand. And what we're going to do is we're going to add those little spikes. And they're coming off of those squiggly lines, the lighter squiggly lines that we did. And they're just single spikes. And you just kind of make them go both ways. So let me see if I can get a little closer. I don't know if you can see that. But see, they're just little spikes up and up the lighter squiggly stripes. You do that with a liner brush and thinned bleach sand. I'll get close as I can here. Ah, that's really close. So all I'm going to do is start at the bottom. Boy, you move a little bit when it's this close. And I'm just going to start doing little, kind of like little V's, but they don't connect at the bottom. And that's going to go all the way up. So you don't have to make these a career. It's kind of like you just set your brush down and kind of flick it a little bit. These are definitely the cactus you don't want to hug. And you also, if you have an outside little line, if you make it come off of the cactus, that's good. So they kind of poke out into the background. So just a nice side load float of soft black along the base of those cactus again. So we just sink those little spines back in the background too. So we're going to be working on this cactus next, which is the prickly pear cactus. It's cactus number 2 on your pattern. And we are going to dry brush highlighting on each one of these sections with golden straw. So each section gets treated as its own little space. So dry brush some golden straw in each section. Oh, I didn't paint them in on this one either. Oh well. So I'm going to start at the top one and just scrub some golden straw in the arms. As long as we're dry brushing golden straw highlighting, we might as well go down to these 3 cactuses labeled number 5 on your pattern and dry brush golden straw on them also. And there is a little arm that I, of course, forgot to put on there. So we dry brush golden straw on the big prickly pear cactus. And now we're doing it on that grouping of 3 barrel cactuses at the bottom. Dry your dry brush out really well because we're going to pick up bleached sand and we're going to dry brush a brighter highlight on this prickly pear cactus. Or if you're lucky enough to have a couple dry brushes, you can grab a new one. But you're going to dry brush bleached sand, but it's going to cover a smaller area. So it doesn't quite get as wide as the golden straw that you dry brushed on there. So on these arms, you want to go kind of above the center or off center a little bit, just to help give those arms a little dimension. And on the body of it, you want to keep it in the top and down the right side a little bit. We are going to float some highlighting on this prickly pear cactus with golden straw, and that's going to be across the top of each section. So just a side load float of golden straw, and you're gonna, I have to turn my guy a little bit, just pick the top of each section and add this float, and it's gonna look pretty bright at first, but it tones down after a bit. And you want it to be a pretty wide highlight stroke, float. On this top section that kind of reminds me of a petal, I'm going to go across the top of it and down the right side. And then, of course, the big center section is going to get highlighted across the top and down the right side. You want to highlight those little buds that are on some of the sections. And so you get to decide which side is the highlighted side. I'm going to go left side on this bottom one. And I'm going to go right side on that one, and then left side on the two that are on the right. We're going to need a couple more colors. We want dragon fruit and Hauser medium green. And what we're going to do is we're going to float some very well blended out dragon fruit to add little tints of color to the tops and down the right side of the larger section. So we want to add very well blended out floats of dragon fruit to add some color to those arms. And when I say very well blended out, this is what I'm talking about. You load your brush just like you were going to do a regular float. And normally what you would do is you would blend your float all in the same line. But when I want to soften my floats, I blend and walk away from that line. So I leave more paint on the palette than I do in my brush. And that just softens it a little bit. And if you feel like you're losing too much paint, you can always back up into the line a little bit. But that just softens the float for me. So I'm going to go and right on top of that highlight we just did, I'm just going to do a little float of dragon fruit. And it doesn't cover the whole highlight. So you just want to tint that a little bit. Now if you want to just kind of wash it on like a glaze, you can do that too if you're more comfortable doing that. We are going to float shading on this cactus with Hauser medium green. And it's not going to be as dark as what you see in the photo because we come back and deepen that shading. But we just need this layer of Hauser medium green on first. So I'm going to float shading down the opposite side that I did the highlight. So it's going to be on the left side on a lot of the arms. And it's not going to show up a whole lot yet, but we need it. And I did it, so you have to do it. You also want to float shading on those little buds. So you can go through your cactus, and the opposite side of where you floated your highlight, you want to float some shading. And wherever an arm of the cactus is coming out of the cactus itself, you want to float around that. You also want to float shading in the bottom of each arm. So just go across the bottom. Or where it connects to the main cactus. In the bottom of the main section, you're going to go above the cactuses that are in front of it. Should I be saying cacti? I don't know. And then there's this one arm. You have the two arms that overlap on the right. You want to separate those also with a little float, a little shade. So now that you have all of those areas shaded, you're going to go back and shade them again with the Hauser dark green, which I didn't have to get out yet. Hauser dark green, and it's going to be a very well blended out float. You want it to be a nice, soft float. We are going to stipple some texture onto our cactus with golden straw and then with bleached sand. So you just want to kind of stipple around, mainly in the highlighted areas, just to add a little bit more texture to the look of the cactus. So whatever stipple brush you like to use, I like to use the same brush that I dry brush with, actually. So I'm just going to kind of stipple on so I can see some little bumps and I don't know what else to call them. I was going to say noogies, but I don't know if that's right. So I think you can kind of see that. So you don't have to do it on those little buds, but sections, that's a little better. Kind of keep it to the highlighted side. And then you're not going to wash your brush out, you're just going to stipple some bleach sand. Ooh, a little too much paint. But it'll be okay. So as soon as you get that golden straw on there, then you want to just wipe your brush out and pick up a little bleach sand, which you should still have on your palette, and do a little bit brighter. Again, it's brighter, so it's not going to cover as large an area. We are going to deepen the shading on the lower edges and across the bottom of these this cactus with floats of soft black. You want to blend it out well. You don't want it to be too harsh. So I'm just going to go along the bottom here. So that's 3 shades. I feel like Diana Markham, if you remember who she is. Remember, I used to hate teaching her stuff because it was like 5 highlights and 5 shadows and it's not everywhere. Okay, it's not on every place that you shaded, but it's to separate the sections from the main part and from each other. And then across the bottom. And I think you can see it in your picture. You're going to need Indian turquoise, and we're going to dry brush, or you could stipple, a little bit of Indian turquoise in the shadow areas on the cactus. So just a little bit of Indian turquoise, stippled or dry brushed in those shadow areas on each section. I'll stipple mine. So we're going to take Hauser Dark Green in our flat brush, and we're going to just do those little C-stroke dimples on every section. don't make too many because we got to line little spines to come out of each one. And once you get going, it goes pretty fast. So just little tiny C strokes to make dimples for our spines to come out of. And that's with Hauser Dark Green. We're going to take a liner brush and some golden straw. Don't add water to it. Just pick up some golden straw. And those little buds, we want to line a golden straw highlight on each of them just to brighten them up a little bit. So it's just a little, kind of just a little dry brushed little line on each of them on the highlighted side, just to make them stand out a little bit more. So whichever side you highlighted them on, you want to stroke a little golden straw to reinforce that highlight a little bit. You want to get out some deep burgundy. We're going to do the little flowers. So each of those little buds is going to get a flower on it. You're going to stroke the petals on first with dragon fruit. And some of them are like, well, most of them are just, you can just pull them out of the top of each of those bud things. But this very top one, you're going to make it like a real flower. You're going to do the whole circle of the petals. So in here, you can just go, just pull some dragon fruit out of the top of each of those little buds. It's kind of like a common stroke, but not really. So don't panic. And then this one, it's going to be like a flower that comes out around the center. You're going to see more of the petals. That's not a very good looking flower, but it'll do. So you can just wipe your brush out and pick up some bleach sand. And you're just going to kind of stroke from the tips of each petal down to give them a little highlight. Hopefully you can keep the point. If it gets too white, just pick up a little bit more dragon fruit. These are not the focal point. So don't stress about them too much. You know, you could line shading at the base of each petal with deep burgundy, or you could float it. For me, it's just a little bit easier to float because I just basically have to touch the tip of my side-loaded brush at the base to do this shading. So I'm just going to add a touch of deep burgundy at the base. Almost got off. Oops. Make it down a little farther. I'm just barely touching my brush into the bottom of those petals. And now comes the fun part. Remember all those little spines that you did on the group of 3 cactus over here? We're going to put little spines in each of those dimples. Oops, and I didn't put dimples on one section. Each of those dimples is going to get little spines, and they're kind of like V's. So there's 2 in each dimple, and they're with thin, soft black. So you can see they're just little tiny strokes that are kind of like V's coming out of each dimple with thin, soft black. They don't have to meet at the base like a V does. If they do, it's okay. If they don't, it's okay. Cactus number 3. Let's see if I can get closer to him. You're gonna, each of these points has a line that comes down from the point. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna float highlighting on that line. If you could see my hand, you'd know what I was talking about. Back-to-back floats next to that line that goes down the center of each of the points at the top. It goes down from the center. And that's with matcha green. So I'm going to come through and do one side first. So I'm coming down from the tip of that point I don't drink this stuff, so I don't know how to pronounce it right. But so I'm just doing one side first, and then I'll come back and do the other side, and they'll be back-to-back floats. So now I'm going to go back and do my other side. The matcha green goes on kind of bright, but then it tones down. Gets a little confusing right in there. So if you're confused, don't worry. I was too for a minute. So now we're going to need evergreen, and get out a little bleach sand also. We are going to float shading on the where the point dips here, this line that we didn't float a back-to-back float on. You're going to float shading on that, again, a back-to-back float on that line. So it's not coming from the point, it's coming from the where the V is, if that makes sense. So with evergreen. So again, I'm going to start on and do one side, and then I'll come back and do the other side. So now wherever the dip is down from the V of the top of the cactus, you're going to float this back-to-back float of evergreen. And it might go kind of on top of a highlight that you did, but that's okay. So now I'm going to come back and do the other side of that float. Oops, sorry about that. You also want to float evergreen on this, the outside edge on the right side and against the other succulents that are in front of it. So wherever a succulent is on top of this guy, you want to float some evergreen. And you're also going to go across the bottom, what little bit of bottom there is. We kind of lost the highlight float a little bit, so I want you to come back and just reinforce it with another soft float of matcha. And you can just do this on one side, just to make that ridge stand out a little bit more. There we go. So we are going to line the spikes on this one down the highlighted edge of that ridge, And these are kind of like little stars. They're just little X's, or snowflakes, kind of. So you just want to make sure you get one along the top edge, and then just line some down each ridge. And that's with thin bleached sand. And they don't have to line up. If they do, it's okay. We're going to work on the two cactuses that are on the right side next. So we're going to float highlighting on each of these sections on cactus number 4, and then we're also going to float highlighting in the top of each of these petals on cactus number 8. And that's with bleached sand. So I'm just going to float on this outside edge with bleached sand here, each of those little scallops. And then I'll move to the next one. And the next one. And then while that dries on that side, I'm going to go and first get this little hair off my brush. Then I'm going to float a highlight on up in the tips, up one side and in the tip of each of these petals on this cactus on the very end. So it's mainly in the tip, but you can start down on the side a little bit. And don't worry about it being a perfect float, because there's a lot of stuff that goes along the top edge of the edges of this cactus here, number 8. And the one side has more of those, what do you want to call them, fans, blades, whatever, than the other side. We're going to float shading on cactus number 4 with avocado. It's going to go across the bottom. So let's float across the bottom of this cactus with avocado. And then you're going to float next to each highlight, you're going to back it up with a shade. Oh, you also want to float up the center on the left side, or down the center on the left side. So that center line is going to get a little shade kind of up the center on the left side. We're going to do another float of avocado. This one is going to be on the highlighted side, but it's going to be just a hair away from the edge so that you get a little ridge. So see, I'm staying off the edge, so I get that little edge there. And it's going to be that way on all the little fan parts of this cactus. But not on the middle, that center line. It only gets that one float. So you're going to need some warm white and some soft black. So on those little ridges that we made on the outside edges of those blades of the cactus, we're going to line a little highlight. And it's going to be like the top 2/3 of those ridges, but you're going to do that with a warm white. So you just want to line a little bit of warm white, like in the top 2/3, to make those ridges stand out just a little bit more. This cactus has spikes too, and they're lined with thin, soft black, but there aren't as many, so you get lucky this time. And they're little V's also, and they just go at the very top and at the point of each of those scallops. A little V of thin, soft black. So these spikes will go much faster than the last ones you did. I kind of added one down here in the shadow area too, just because I want you to think there's a scallop down there. We are going to work on this group of 3 that's in the front of our big cactuses. So the first thing we're going to do with that is with golden straw. We already dry brushed highlighting. So now we're going to line each of these little sections with a thin line of golden straw. So just add a line of golden straw. I'm going to outline the outside edges also, because this is where our spikes are going to come from, and we want our spikes to show on those outside edges. You're going to get out black green, and we're going to float some shading next to those lines, just on one side. So from the center out, it's going to be on the right side, and then the left side from the center towards the left. So I'm just going to float right next to this with black green, and then right next to that, and just go around wherever you can float. And I can't float on that very edge, so I'm not going to do that. But here again, I'm going to go through and do one side, and then I'll come back and do the other. And you also want to float around this arm that's sticking out across the other one, if that makes any sense at all. So I'm going to do the other sides. And then you also want to float along the bottom edge of each one and across the bottom of this little arm that sticks out too. Oops, let me get up. Sorry. You want to go around that one little cactus that's in their succulent that's in front of the one on the right. And since you love lining spikes so much, the spikes on this one are lined with bleached sand, and there are a lot of them. So up each of those lines that you did with golden straw, you're going to just line a whole lot of little spikes, and some of them are V's and some of them, like the ones on the side, just kind of stick out straight. But every little gold line that you did is going to get spikes lined on it with thinned bleached sand. Oops, need a smaller. And here again, they don't have to be perfect little spikes. I guess I just got so used to lining them with bleached sand. They don't all have to stick straight up either. They can come out sideways, or this is one of those cactuses that you can't touch at all without getting poked. So these cactuses have yellow blossoms, and they're done much the same as the ones we did that are pink. They're just a little bit larger because you want them to cover like an oval in the top of each cactus. So you're going to do those, stroke them on first with golden straw. And there's even a few little petals that come out of the arm and out of this other bud over here that eventually gets covered up a little bit. So a liner brush or a round brush and some golden straw. You want to start adding those blooms to those cactuses. And they can just be, they don't have to be comma strokes per se. Just kind of set down. If you can get a point on them, that's good. But they don't have to have points, because you're going to come back and line some highlighting on them anyway. But just make sure you make it big enough to cover an oval in the top there. On this one, it's just 2 or 3 petals. And try to keep your hands out of them. So just like we did those pink blooms, you're going to come back with your liner brush and warm white and just line a little highlight in the tip of each petal. And then, just like we did with the pink flowers, we are going to touch a bit of canyon orange at the base of each petal. And you can do that with your liner brush or with a flat brush, like a float. So I'm just going to touch my brush in at the center and add a little tint of canyon orange at the base of each petal. Now I kind of lost the flower on my arm because I didn't put the pattern on right, but it'll be okay. Then you're going to take your liner brush and soft black, and you're just going to tap in a little bit, little dots of soft black in the centers of the full-grown petals, the full-grown flowers. So not on the arm and not on that little bud, but just tap in some centers. Doesn't have to be a whole lot, and I suggest doing it with your liner brush so that it will dry faster and you won't drag your hands through it. We are going to work on this little guy here and then his partner over here on the left side. Those were based in with Hauser light green. And what we're going to do is we're going to float a little bit of dragon fruit in the tips of each of the little petals. This is where you can straighten up your pattern if you want. Keep your hand out of those dots though. So I'm just going to float like a C-stroke float of dragon fruit in the tip of each of those petals. Then do the same thing to the little guy that's kind of in the center of the piece. I just love the dragon fruit on the green. I think it looks so pretty. And then you want to brighten up just a few of the petals on the outside edges by floating dragon fruit plus a touch of warm white. So you just want a little bit lighter value of dragon fruit. And this doesn't have to go on every petal. Just pick a few that you want to brighten up a little bit. If you can still get in your Hauser dark green, each of those has a little stem. There's on the left side, the stem comes out and goes to the little flowers that are floating up in the air right now. And then you also add another little stem with some, what do you want to call them? Other tiny stems coming out of them that we're going to add dots to. And then the one in the center has a kind of long stem that we're going to add dots to. So with thinned Hauser dark green, we're going to line those stems so that you want it to come out of the center. So like this. And then I'm going to line another one. I'm going to add some little stems coming off of it. And this one, it can just come from in between these top two leaves or petals, and it goes pretty tall. And you just want to add some little stems coming off of it to add dots to. And of course, I warned you earlier, if I do a line, I most likely line a highlight on it. So each of those stems is going to get a little highlight of golden straw. And it doesn't have to cover the whole stem. It can just be hit and miss here and there, just to highlight it a little bit. Even those little shoots that come out, you want to touch a little highlight on some of those. At the base of each petal, you want to touch a little bit of Hauser dark green shading. Again, it's just going to be sticking the corner of your brush down in the center of each leaf or petal. I have to decide what I'm going to call them. Need a little bit more paint. Makes me wish I would have put a whole lot more petals on here. No. You want to add a little dot to each of those little, I forgot what I called them, stems that come off that stem that we lined with Hauser Dark Green. So you just want to add a little Hauser Dark Green dot. And again, I do it with my liner brush so that it will dry quicker. Each of those little petals gets a quick outline of thin bleach sand, and then there are some little speckles that you just tap on with your liner brush in the tips, kind of in the pink area of the petal. So you don't have to make these a career, it's just a quick little outline. Too much paint on my brush. And then just tap, 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 tap. Some little speckles in the tips. They're not dots. So you don't have to worry about getting them nice and round. They're just little speckles. You want to add a highlight to each of those little dots that you did with golden straw. So just a teeny tiny little highlight on each dot. So you're going to float some highlighting in the tip of each of these leaves on this plant here on the left with golden straw. So just up in the tip, I want a little bit more paint than that. I'm just going to float some golden straw just up in the tip of each leaf. And then just in the very tippy tip, you want to float a little bit brighter highlight with bleach sand. So you don't want to make it quite as big as this first float of golden straw. You just kind of want to touch your brush in the tip of each leaf with bleach sand. You're going to take your liner brush, and with bleach sand, you want to line these little stripes that go horizontally across each leaf, each petal. So really quick and easy, just kind of like a whole bunch of hash marks, but with thin bleach sand. So just little stripes like that on each petal. We're going to float shading in the bottom of each of these petals with evergreen. So I'm going to turn mine sideways so I can do it a little easier. So I'm going to go in the bottom here. And then wherever I need to separate a petal from another petal, I'm going to do that with evergreen also. With your liner brush, there are also some little detail lines that I pulled out from the base of each petal, kind of like what you do around the center of flower petals. Just a few little lines just to give it some more variation in color, and that's with thinned evergreen. So just quick little lines at the base. Just two more things to do to this cactus. You're going to need just a dot of Georgia clay. Not too much. And all we're going to do is we're going to add some little tints of Georgia clay into mainly the shadow side of each petal. So just to add another layer of color. You just want to very well blend out your Georgia clay and just add some little hints of this orange into your cactus, your succulent. This one's a succulent. It doesn't have spines. So just dibby dab some Georgia clay here and there. That one got a little dark. So we're going to take our liner brush next, and with bleach sand we're just going to line one side of each leaf, and it's kind of like a comma stroke, kind of thick and bulby at the top and then a line. Don't do the same side on each one. Vary the sides a little bit. So just bleach sand and do a little line on one side of each leaf. Take that back, warm white. Do it with warm white. And that just helps you clean up your leaves a little bit. We are going to go work on this guy over here. We're going to float shading at the base of each of these petals with evergreen also. We highlighted them with bleach sand. So now we're going to come in and float evergreen at the base of each petal, or wherever another cactus is on top of them. All right, this one, you're going to take your liner brush and bleach sand, and you're just going to add some little vertical lines. They don't have to be one whole line. They can be hit and miss on each leaf. And then you're also going to take your liner brush and just set down those little nodes that are on the edges of each leaf. So little lines first, and then set down those little nodes. So I'm not making complete, I'm kind of like wood grain, I guess. Now this is going to be a completely up to you kind of thing, but if you want, you can come back in with some evergreen and just not do that, but just kind of refloat the shading a little bit here and there, just to tone down some of those nodes where they go behind other leaves. It doesn't have to be a full-on. You don't have to float the whole thing over again. You just need to touch it on those points where the nodes go behind the other leaf, just to tone them down. So we have one more set of cactuses or succulents to do, and the shading and highlighting on them is all going to be done with your liner brush, because it's just easier to keep control of the shape of the leaves with your liner brush. So you're going to need Hauser light green and Indian turquoise, Hauser dark green, and warm white if you can't get in yours anymore. You don't need a whole lot. These are just little succulents. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to line a highlight in the tip of each petal, and it's going to go about halfway down with Hauser light green. So I'm just going to literally line that top half of each petal with Hauser light green. Now, I don't know if you can see it here, but this little part right here is like the inside. The petals are kind of cupped. So you just want to line like on that lower edge. You want to leave that little cup there. So what you just did with the Hauser light green, you're going to come back on top of it with Indian turquoise, but you're not going to take it as far down as you did the Hauser light green. So you're just going to get some blue on the tips. I guess I'll get over here where you can see. So it doesn't go quite as far down the petal or the leaf as your Hauser light green did. So you're going to line shading in the bottom of each petal with Hauser dark green. And here is where you kind of fill in those little cups shapes. So you're just going to fill in the insides of those little cup-shaped petals. the very tips of the blue parts of this succulent, get a little bit of a highlight stroke with Indian turquoise plus warm white. So just make a lighter value of Indian turquoise, and then just the very tips, so it makes them stand out a little bit more. Now we're gonna work on our rocks and they're tiny rocks. They're not great big ones that go along here and kind of hide some of your the bases of your cactus. So you can see I've tucked a few here and there, wherever there's a just to add interest and also to cover up these lines right here. And the way I do those is I'm going to paint them with slate gray, and then while they're wet I'm going to blend some shading into the right side with soft black and some highlights with warm white. So you probably want to work on just a couple of rocks at a time. So you need some slate gray, can't talk anymore. Soft black, if you can still get in yours, that's good, and some warm white. Think like a rock. I'm going to tell you that. Think like a rock. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my liner brush and some slate gray, and I'm just going to put the shape of a rock down here. It's kind of squiggly. Think like a piece of coal or something. It's kind of flat on the bottom, but not kind of curvy and stuff on the top and uneven. Just think like a rock. So I've painted 3 of them there, and so I'm just going to wipe my brush out, and I'm going to pick up some warm white, and I am going to, let me think what side. I'm going to go on the left side and just kind of tap in some warm white to give it kind of ridges and pockets. These aren't the focal points, so don't get too hung up on them. Then just wipe your brush out again. Pick up a little bit of soft black and come into the other side and kind of dibby dab in some soft black to give you the darker side. And if it blends in with the gray, that's fine. That's what you want. You don't want it to be totally stark soft black. You're just looking for the suggestion that these are rocks. So wherever you come along here and you want to put some rocks in, like I want to cover up some of this. So I'm going to paint a couple little rocks here. And I might make a bigger rock. And I might want a rock here. I'm going to do, 3 of them at a time, maybe, so that I can keep that working wet on wet thing going. So I'm just dibby dabbing some warm white on them to give me a highlighted side. And then I'm just going to dibby dab some soft black to give me a shadow side. This is the hardest thing on the whole piece. I probably want a couple more over here. And one over here. So wherever you want to hide something. And not the whole cactus though, okay? Let's do a couple out here. And they can be as big or as small as you want them, depending on what you want to hide. And you can have as many as you want. Once you decide that you don't have to be so perfect about all these things, it goes a lot quicker. They're just rocks. They're not, it's not the Mona Lisa. Do you ever go up really close to a painting? I'm amazed at how little detail there really is in some of the flowers and rocks and things like that. It's more like this, dibby dab on, because when you stand back from it, it looks like a rock, a regular rock that you shaded and highlighted and did all kinds of stuff to. The lettering is stenciled or painted in, whichever you choose to do, with soft black. Ooh, awesome. If you decide you want a stencil, I still have them, so you're welcome to do that. Now, when I stencil letters on, I don't care what kind of letters they are, I always like to come back with my liner brush and some of the color that I stenciled with, and I like to, there's only 2 places on this, so you looked out. Wherever these little bridges are that are cut into this stencil so that the center doesn't fall out, I like to fill those up so that way it looks more like you actually lettered the stencil, the lettering on, instead of stenciled it. So that's my handy dandy tip for today. Lettering you can do later. I just wanted to show you that tip about filling in those bridges. So we want to deepen the shading on the background with some floats of rookwood red. Say that 3 times real fast. But it's not going to go everywhere. I just want it in the deepest places. So where these, like these spaces here in between the cactus and here, I'll deepen it, and maybe a couple places along here. So it's not going to go all the way around again. It's just going to go in the deepest, lowest places around the design. And that's just a float, a nice soft, well blended out float of rookwood red. Notice I said that real slow this time. Just going to deepen this up with just a little bit. It really does make a difference. Maybe here. And just tuck it around. And a little bit maybe in here. There aren't that many places that you really want to put this or need to put this. I have the hiccups now. I haven't even been drinking yet. I'm going to stick a little bit right up in here above the prickly pear cactus. So just wherever you decide you want to deepen the shading a little bit. I think that's pretty good for me. Okay, I'm going to call that good. And you can always go back and add more if you decide you want to deepen some areas more later. We want to I didn't do the lettering on this one. We want to take our liner brush and add a line to separate between the orange and the bleach sand background, and that's with soft black. So just a nice thin little stripe. And I'm going to shock you. This one I am not going to shade or highlight. There's only 2 things left to do on this. And one of them is we are going to shade again all the way around the outside edge, including this time the bottom border. And that's going to be done with very well blended out espresso. So if I would start at this line that separates the two together, from each other, not together. How can you separate things together? My goodness. So I'm just going to float, and I've got lots of goobers. around the outside edge with a nice soft float of espresso or espresso. It's a nice soft brown that looks really good on both the orange and the bleach sand. I'm surprised I don't use it more often. Now the last thing that I do, and this is something that I always do to my lettering, is I always line a shadow next to my lettering on the background to the top and left of each letter. I think you can see it here. So wherever there's a top edge or on the left side, I'm going to line a wash of espresso. I can't say that very well. And I always do this to my lettering. But this one is another one of those where if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. But that's the last thing to do. And then you'll have a completed piece. So I'm going to show you what I do. So each letter just going to come left and top. So you're going to do a much nicer job though. Yours is going to look so much better because you're probably going to wait till tomorrow. So left and top, I just line a little shadow on the background. And that's the last thing you do besides sign it. You guys, so I'm going to finish that on my lettering later.